Welcome to this lesson dedicated to the fascinating world of the market and its various configurations. Understanding market dynamics is essential for anyone who wants to understand how the economy works. Together, we will analyze the mechanisms that regulate the exchange of goods and services. A market is much more than just a physical place where products are purchased. It's a dynamic concept that can also exist in virtual and interconnected environments. Its main function is to allow those who wish to sell to meet those who wish to buy. This meeting of supply and demand is the driving force of every modern economy. The market plays a central role, defining the value and availability of goods. It is precisely here that prices are formed and resources are allocated. However, the market is not a single immutable entity. Its dynamics are profoundly influenced by what we call market forms. These forms represent the different structures a market can assume. The specific characteristics of a market form significantly determine the behavior of both sellers and buyers. For example, the number of operators present or the nature of the products offered shape strategies. These structures, in turn, directly influence the prices at which goods are traded and the quantities available on the market. At the heart of any market analysis is the concept of equilibrium. Market equilibrium is the ideal point where the forces of supply and demand are perfectly balanced. It is a desirable condition of stability for the system to function. To understand equilibrium dishas, we must first examine its two fundamental components, supply and demand. We begin with demand, which represents the willingness of consumers. Demand is the total quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing to purchase. This willingness to purchase is not random, but is closely linked to a given price. Generally, at lower prices, consumers are willing to purchase larger quantities. It is an inverse relationship that defines the demand curve. Let's now move on to supply, which reflects the perspective of producers and sellers. Supply is the quantity of a good or service that producers are willing to sell. Again, the quantity supplied is influenced by price. Producers tend to supply more when the price is higher, as this means higher profits. This direct relationship between price and quantity supplied is the basis of the supply curve. The equilibrium price is the crucial point at which the quantity demanded by consumers and the quantity supplied by producers coincide. It is the only price at which the market is free from excess demand or supply. At this specific point, there are no incentives for producers to modify production or for consumers to change their purchasing habits. The equilibrium price thus ensures a stable and efficient market. Let's begin our analysis of market forms with perfect competition. It's important to emphasize from the outset that perfect competition is a purely theoretical market form. Although it's difficult to implement in practice, it's a fundamental model. We will now examine its distinctive features. The first is a large number of sellers. Not only are there many sellers, but none of them are large enough to influence the market. Likewise, there is a large number of buyers. There are also many buyers, and none of them has enough purchasing power to change the market price. Their individuality is irrelevant. Another essential condition is that the products offered are homogeneous. This means that the goods or services sold are identical to each other, regardless of the seller. There is no differentiation perceptible to the consumer. Then we assume perfect information. All market participants, both sellers and buyers, have complete and immediate access to all relevant information. They know prices, quality, and technologies. Freedom of market entry is also crucial. Any new company can begin production and sales without significant barriers. There are no high costs or legal restrictions impeding entry. Conversely, there is also the freedom to exit the market. Companies can cease operations without facing prohibitive costs or legal constraints. This ensures flexibility and adaptation. Thanks to these characteristics, in a perfectly competitive market, no single operator has the ability to influence the price. Both sellers and buyers are called price takers. They must accept the price formed on the market. The price in this ideal configuration is formed spontaneously. It is the pure, unmanipulated result of the encounter between total demand and total supply. No single player can exercise market power. Despite its theoretical usefulness, perfect competition has obvious limitations. The greatest is its impracticability in practice. The required ideal conditions are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to find in the real world. Indeed, it is very difficult for all the required conditions to be met simultaneously. Often, even just one of the assumptions, such as product homogeneity or perfect information, is not met. This makes perfect competition a point of reference, rather than a description of reality. At the opposite pole of perfect competition is monopoly. This market structure represents the opposite extreme, characterized by the total absence of competition. It is a unique market structure. Its nature is defined by a fundamental characteristic, a single seller. In a monopoly, there is only one company that produces and offers a given good or service to the entire market. There are no other suppliers. This single seller holds total control over the entire offering of the good or service in question. Its dominant position is absolute, and consumers have no alternatives for that specific product. Consequently, in a monopoly, there is a total absence of direct competitors. Barriers to entry are so high that they prevent any other firm from entering the market. This consolidates the monopolist's power. The power of the monopolist is significant. Unlike perfectly competitive firms, the monopolist has the ability to set the price of its product. It is a price maker. However, this power is not unlimited. It is limited by overall market demand. The monopolist cannot charge such a high price that it makes the good unaffordable or undesirable for all consumers. If the price is too high, the quantity demanded will decrease dramatically. The consequences of a monopoly are often disadvantageous for consumers. Prices tend to be potentially higher than in a competitive market. The lack of competition reduces the incentive to keep costs down. Furthermore, monopoly can lead to a smaller quantity supplied to the market. The monopolist, to maximize profits, may limit production, creating artificial scarcity. All of this translates into a significant disadvantage for consumers. They have less choice, pay higher prices, and may receive lower quality since the monopolist is not stimulated by competition. Having examined the theoretical extremes, we now focus on the most common and relevant market forms in economic reality. Oligopoly and monopolistic competition describe most industrial sectors. These structures are much closer to our everyday experience. Let's start with oligopoly. This type of market is characterized by a limited number of companies. Only a few large companies dominate the majority of the supply in a specific industry. Consider, for example, the mobile phone or automobile industries. In these sectors, a few large companies hold the most significant market share. This is a clear example of oligopoly. A defining characteristic of oligopoly is that the decisions of each firm directly influence the others. If one firm changes its price or introduces a new product, the others must respond. This strategic interdependence is crucial. This very interdependence generates complex strategic interactions. Companies must anticipate their rivals' moves and plan accordingly. It's a kind of game between a few large players. In some cases, oligopolistic firms may also attempt to reach agreements. This practice, known as collusion deizo, is intended to control prices or limit production. However, collusion is often illegal and difficult to maintain. Let's now move on to monopolistic competition. This too is an extremely widespread market structure. It is characterized by a large number of firms operating in the sector. The key feature is the offering of differentiated products. Each company sells a product that is similar, but not identical, to that of its competitors. Differentiation is the key. Clear examples of monopolistic competition are the clothing and restaurant industries. There are many clothing stores, but each offers its own style and brand. Likewise, each restaurant has its own menu and atmosphere. Thanks to this differentiation, each monopolistically competitive firm enjoys a certain market power. It is not a complete price taker, but it can slightly influence the price of its own unique product. This power comes precisely from product differentiation. Elements such as brand, perceived quality, design, or additional services make a company's product preferable to some customers. Consumers are willing to pay a slightly higher price for these unique features. However, despite its differentiation power, each company is still subject to competition from others. If the price becomes too high, consumers can easily switch to a similar product offered by another company. Competition remains a major force. Oligopoly and monopolistic competition share some common consequences. They can lead to a greater variety of products and services than a monopolistic market. Competition, while not perfect, stimulates innovation and diversity. Despite the benefits of variety, these market structures can also lead to higher prices than perfect competition. Product differentiation or scarcity of players reduces price pressure. Consumers pay for variety or brand recognition. In conclusion, we have explored the concept of the market and its various structures. From theoretical perfect competition to monopoly through the more realistic scenarios of oligopoly and monopolistic competition. Each form has its own dynamics and implications for consumers and producers. Understanding these structures is essential to analyzing economics and business strategies.